Going on, everyone? I'm tonight. Conversations that matter. We record a shout out to the entire DP Dub family and everyone else involved. Tonight's episode is one that I'm super excited for. My guest came on my radar while I was perusing Da Vinci's Discord, and then came through for the conversation between women about abortion. Had some great points, extremely intelligent. So I was like, yo, I want to hear the story behind that. I want to get to know the person. So without any further ado, allow me to introduce you to LivWhoWaits. Liv, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Steve.
How are you?
I am doing great. Thanks for asking. Also, I just got over being sick, so
Okay.
My apologies if my voice is a little rough.
No problem. No one has to apologize for being sick ever. So I gave you a rollout, but why don't you let's do this? Can you please give, because I've tried to do as much research as possible. Actually, I'm nervous because this is the first time I've ever had someone on who I can't just go and like YouTube. You're like a secret agent. So why don't you just tell the people a little bit about yourself and how you ended up in Da Vinci's Discord, and then we'll get into your whole story and we'll work our way from there.
Of course, yeah. So I love my anonymity, if that makes any sense. But yeah. I am so excited to be here today. I think this is a conversation worth having, and I'm just super excited. But yeah, my name is Liv. I go by LivWhoWaits, technologically challenged crochet grandma, like just all sorts of different nicknames. But I'm pretty much a rando. I'm your normal college student, majoring in classical liberal arts, minoring in biblical studies. I'm a language nerd. I enjoy my Latin, my Korean, and soon to be Greek. Yeah.
Or which are you learning, like classical Greek?
So I'm starting with classical Greek, also known as addict Greek, and your semester 4 of Greek, we get to learn koine, which I am so excited about. That's kind of my motivation behind learning Greek. Does that make any sense?
No, it makes total sense. And don't refer to yourself as a rando. I think everyone has a great story, and there's so much to tell behind it. And the way it works for me with conversations, this is a platform, this show strictly, where it's not about debate or any of those things. I find interesting people, and I just want to hear from their side of the table, what it is they believe, how they came to those conclusions. So let's start with where I met you.
Mm-hmm.
Did a stream. One of my most nerve-wracking streams I've ever done before I lived. A conversation between 4 women about abortion. I didn't feel it was appropriate to start that conversation with guys because of all the energy surrounding it, right? It's a hot button issue, and I felt like the best rollout, and we're going to do more installments, would be great if we just had women come on. And I noticed that there's someone in the chat, like a machine gun, just like, what about this? What about this? And it was you. So I want to hear a little bit more about your background. Let's start with this. Are you a Christian?
I am a Christian, yes.
Okay. Can we tell us, without doxing yourself, where did you grow up? How did you grow up? When did you get saved?
So I was raised in a Christian household. Both my parents, my dad's a theology professor, my mom's a stay-at-home mom. I was homeschooled growing up. I attended a homeschool co-op with a classical Christian model. I currently go to a little tiny private Christian college which is where I am doing my biblical studies minor and classical liberal arts major. The story of how I got saved, I would say it's kind of like cute, childish story, if that makes any sense. But I read, my parents were reading a book about how siblings can learn to get along, essentially.
Mhm.
And it was from a Christian perspective, and it made the point that, because since it was from a Christian perspective, it made the point that you need a personal relationship with Christ that you voluntarily and individually choose. It can't be just something that your parents gave you. And I, or, just you following in the default that your parents,
Right.
it's not your parents' faith, it's your faith.
Right.
And regardless on how you feel theologically about like children of Christians, that like stuck with me. And I I decided, well, it's really important that I accept Christ as my savior. I figured the day I do it is going to be a really special day, so I need to wait till my birthday so that I. But like 2 days before my birth, I think it was either 2 days or one day before my birthday. I was like, this is too important to wait. I've got to do this now. I was 11, and I was like, Jesus, I want you to be my savior, essentially. So I thought it was too important to wait, but yeah.
I love that, and I love that for you. It's funny because you're talking about growing up the child of Christians, and I've met so many people who grew up in a house filled with faith, and then they had to go on their own personal journey to really find. I don't want to use the term "find their faith" because I don't want to go invite a large theological conversation, whether you be an Arminian or a Calvinist. I'll just agree to say that they they went on a journey to find their faith. After you made the proclamation, what in life changed for you in that instance?
I wouldn't say there was any like mystical, deeply emotional experience that went along with it.
Okay.
And I, but I would say there was something about making that decision on my own that made me a different person. It was,
Mm.
it was, I do believe like emotions are important,
Right.
but if you're purely basing your faith off of a mystical or emotional fuzzy spiritual feeling, that's not the whole story. And for me, my journey of faith has been largely a journey of, obviously there's intellect and emotion involved, but
Right.
for me it's like on the moral and level and on the level of the will mostly, because I'm not. And I guess what I'm insinuating isn't that I became a better person. It's more like sin was ruined for me, if that makes any sense. Like,
Elaborate. Explain that to us.
so yeah, so I couldn't enjoy sin the way I used to.
Okay.
I found I had a sensitized conscience. I would still sin, obviously. I would still do things that I knew I wasn't supposed to do, but
Right.
it was it wasn't like enjoyable like it used to be. Like I remember the first lie I ever told, and I had no like I had to have been like 8 at the time.
Right.
I felt no remorse over it. I was
Mm.
just like, I'm looking out for number one. It was like I stole some Twizzlers. My mom asked me what I was eating, and I was like, I'm eating a peanut butter and jelly. But uh, I I would say like that sin has been ruined for me. Like I can't enjoy it like I used to. I can't, because he has replaced it with a sense of, there's a quote I really love by Oswald Chambers which says, the conscience attaches itself to the highest thing, the highest moral standard you know, and for Christians that is
Mm.
Christ. And if your highest moral standard is Christ, then you do not settle for anything other than complete like holiness, not in the sense that you're legalistic, but
Right.
you do not, you grieve over sin. And that was the main change in my life.
And how old were you again?
I had to have been like 11. It was either leading up to my 11th birthday or
See, and this is the thing I'm talking about. This is amazing because another reason I wanted to have you on the show. We'll get to the hot button issues here in a second, is because I find myself often clarifying for people what the Christian position is on most things, right? And I think it serves for the conversation to give a general basis of why Christians believe what they believe. And hearing you share your faith story has started us on that journey. But I think that sometimes as Christians, we can take for granted that when we say it's about the gospel, people may not necessarily know what we're referring to. So let me ask you this question for the laity, for if you were explaining it to the people in the chat that aren't our friends right now, what is the gospel?
The gospel is the solution to a problem that we don't always know is there, but that if we do, like, if we think carefully, if we see, the thing is, maybe it's because I've been reading Mere Christianity again,
That's
but
funny. I've been reading that as well lately.
yeah, it's an amazing book, but the Christianity is unique in the sense that it's I have never seen any other religion that has God reach down to people. Normally, it's people reaching up to God, not people trying to please God or God's or karma or a higher power with their works. And that, to me, is what makes Christianity unique. And to me, it's like the solution to the problem is Christ. And the problem that I'm referring to is our sin nature. And we like to point fingers. We like to see it. We see it very easily in other people, but we make excuses for ourselves. We're kind of, and that's the issue with sin. We're kind of willfully blind. And I think it takes, like, in some ways, the gospel is like, it's like a pair of glasses or hearing aids, or it's showing you a problem that you may not necessarily have known was there. And obviously that's not the most eloquent way or even persuasive way of putting it. I would, but yeah.
No, it doesn't have to be eloquent. It doesn't have to be persuasive. Thank you for answering the question. And I really love what you said there about like sin nature. And sometimes we don't recognize it in ourselves, which brings me to the next portion. Here's something that typically happens, I believe, when Christians enter the fray, as you did that night in political discourse, social discourse. The first thing is that I have seen people try to discredit Christians just simply based off of their belief structure. Now, before we get to that part, let's talk about the pro-life position. Liv, do you live in fear as a woman telling people that you're pro-life? Are you worried that someone's going to come burn down your house? You're going to be ostracized from society? How do you deal with all the pressures?
So it's complicated. I as you know, my server is very I've brought it up in my server before, and it's like I try to be like really respectful, not push my opinions on people, but it has come up like multiple times. And I would say there is a little bit of apprehension going into that, but now but I almost feel like as a woman and as a human being, it's something that I feel like needs to be talked about more often. And as I've done more research and I feel more secure in my position, it's become, the apprehension has decreased, definitely. But obviously, it'll still always be there to some extent.
And why do you think there is apprehension at all? Besides, I was using a little levity but for you personally, why do you think there would be apprehension to speak out against it?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it's like I'm a people pleaser. I don't like disagreement. I don't like confrontation, and I don't like heated emotions, which is weird considering I like debate. But that's another whole story. But but it's to me, it's like I'm afraid to disagree with the prevailing opinion.
Okay.
I'm afraid to be, even if I do feel like what I believe is like, I do feel strongly about it, and I do think there is evidence, there is a case. I still don't like it's not pleasant for me to disagree with the prevailing opinion.
But what? So, and I can see that. I can feel that coming off you right now. But you're like a lion when you do have to disagree. So what happens? What's the brain switch there when it's that moment where you're not worrying about being disagreeable and you step into that? What's that like?
To me, I have to gauge the room, I have to gauge the environment. I have to see if people are willing to discuss in a clear-headed way and are open to a discussion. Because if I'm just seeing people emoting or ranting, that's not the place for me to say my opinion. Because they may not be.
Uh-oh. Check 1 2. Drop a 1 in the chat if you can hear me. I think we might have lost Liv for a second there. 1's in the chat. Can y'all hear me? Are we still live? Looks like it. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay, so you can still hear me. I think we lost Liv for a second. Oh, wait.
Oh, I am so sorry. That was on my end.
No
I
worries.
apologize.
No problem. No
But
problem.
yeah, I told my family don't run the microwave because the microwave for some reason messes with the internet. Someone may not have gotten the memo, but yeah. What I was saying was I gauged the room. And one example of the time when I felt like it was appropriate to share my opinion was your show when you had the panel for women discussing abortion. I felt like there was a discussion going on. We were having a back and forth. It was a space where people may be open to hearing things that they may disagree with. Obviously, it was a little heated, but that's natural when you are dealing with such a sensitive issue. But everybody was reasonable and sweet, and so I don't regret it. I think it was a very good space for that, and that's what I'm thankful for what you do here, Steve.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. And here's the crazy thing about that, right? I think you tell me what you feel, Liv. I think we kind of live in a place now where, having differing views and trying to have civil conversation is more pushed back on than any other time. Than I'm not going to say the history of man, but I'll say in the history of my life. At 41 years, I've never seen people so scared to have conversation, right? At first, I thought maybe it was because people were scared of losing things. I was on maybe it's the cancel culture stuff, but now I realize that people lacked the courage of their convictions. Like they won't say the private things that they complain about publicly or the things they say they think deeply about. How do you feel about that?
That's a huge shame to me, honestly, that we are afraid to have difficult conversations. And there's the stereotype about, your extended family being around the Thanksgiving table and being like, oh, I dread this. They're going to bring up Trump. They're going to bring up the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or it's COVID or masks. Or it's such a shame that because I feel free to cite this quote because I do not remember who said it. But the issue with us isn't that religion and politics are bad to discuss. It's that we can't discuss them intelligently and clear-headedly. We get very emotional, which is not wrong in every sense, but we get defensive. We get our egos wrapped up in it, and that's a shame to me because it's like we should be open to learning from others. We should be constantly surrounded by people who are smarter than us and who challenge us. We should have that back and forth. It shouldn't be something we're afraid of.
Liv, you're quickly becoming one of my favorite people. I'm sure everyone in the chat was like, Steve is probably eating this up right now. Let's backpedal a little bit. So you're a younger person, right? And I think one of those things I want to throw out there for people who are unfamiliar with the Christian lifestyle or position, because I don't like to use myself as a model. Sometimes I tell people, I'm like, you should not look to me for that example, because right now, not being connected to a church, I'm outside of orthodoxy in that sense. I think some people thought the other night I was saying I don't believe in Orthodox Christianity. No, I affirm Sola scriptura. I am reformed in my theology. I just know that at this point in my life, I choose my words carefully. But you're a younger Christian, and I think it would be helpful for people to hear what it's like for you walking through the world as a young person and a Christian, because I think people think young people that are Christians are like aliens, or they think of Mandy Moore in that movie Saved, and they're just like, you know, at Bible camp and they don't have lives or feelings. What is your experience like?
That's such a good question. And I would say you're absolutely right. Like, statistically, at least based on my knowledge and based on just anecdotes, it is very rare for like college aged people to be in a church.
Right.
Now, I know that's like not always the case. Like my college is full of young Christians who aspire to be lawyers and politicians, and so I would say that's generally an exception to the rule. And very often we do see young people leaving the church, and it's a shame. And I think it's, in my own experience, I guess, to get back to your question, it's like I struggle sometimes finding that community of like, and this is not me saying that my church is like flawed or doing anything wrong, but it is like an older population for the most part, which is good because you have a lot that you can learn from like older people. But I do sometimes like miss hearing from people who are like at a similar stage in their spiritual growth as me, or you know, people I can relate to in terms of like, hey, we're both in college, which, to be fair, I get that a lot in my my college experience since I go to a private Christian college. But it is like something that I miss sometimes, and there's a whole discussion to be had about why young people are leaving the church. Is that their choice? Is that the church not, quote unquote, appealing to young people? But I don't think I'm necessarily equipped for that, if that makes any sense. All I know is that as a young person who is a Christian myself, I think it's tough because we live in the age of the internet. We can look up any theological question that we have, and I think that's kind of what we kind of are seeking, like, not an intellectual faith per se, but we want those hard questions answered.
You're referring to like young people wanting the harder questions.
Oh yes. That's been the experience of a lot of my classmates as well.
Well, I mean, but here's the difference in I think between you and say someone that and if you don't mind me saying this, when I was reading over your bio and I saw that you were minoring in biblical studies, now I don't want to pump your head up and blow up your ego, right? But that is, you're in a different position in regards to your understanding of things like hermeneutics, eisegesis, exegesis. These are terms that most people, like most Christians, don't know, and most of the population don't know. So does that, the education portion, does that ever make you feel isolated? Because I wasn't a Christian until later in life, and I didn't go to seminary. I just studied later in life. But I've always wanted to ask seminary goers, do you feel isolated at all?
Well, a little bit, if that makes any sense. Like I said, I have my college community, but my college community is not a good, like, demographic representation of how most people my age are.
Right.
I don't know if, like, you've ever had the experience where, like, you try to make friends your age, and sometimes you like go on a little nerdy rant about something you like, and they're not entirely sure what's up. And again, like, I'm a baby theologian. I wouldn't even say theologian at this point. I'm a theology student. But it's like, I don't even know like 90% of what there is to know. But it can be like feeling like you're speaking another language at times.
I could dig that. I could dig that. I think that's why the church I used to belong to in California, I always thought it was pretty cool that they made an effort. It was a younger church. When I say younger, I was probably like 5 years older than most of the people in there, including the pastor. And they tried to make it like an effort to make sure they built and connected people, the community, especially the young people. So let's get back to you and your strong argumentation. So right now, you folks are listening to Liv's voice, and I don't want you to be fooled with that because I've read some of the things that you've, some of the presentations you've made in Da Vinci's Discord. So let's talk about this for a second. How often would you say that you are involved in those type of conversations? Involved in like conversations where you're defending the faith when you're making a presentation about the faith or pushing back on something?
That used to be something I did very rarely, if ever, because again, I think it's like the people pleasing instinct.
Okay.
But as I've had a community of people, like just like a community of internet friends, some of whom are Christian, but most of whom are non-religious,
Mhm.
it comes up more often, and I feel like it's not only something I've grown to enjoy more, but something that I just feel like comes up naturally in conversation more often. And that's honestly that's what I want. Not in the sense I think I have I think I'm the savior of the world or the white knight of the Christian faith, but that I want people to be willing to have those conversations. And like, if I don't know the answer, I want to be like, I don't know. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's look into that.
I can dig it. So let me ask you this question: what are things that you think are commonly misrepresented about Christians in today's society? What are some of the things that kind of maybe get under your skin, or you just people are just not representing correctly?
That is, I think the gospel message is the most important one because and I would say second to that is the whole idea of contradictions in the Bible, if that
Okay.
makes, or contradictions, or
Yeah.
just a lack of belief in like the Bible's credibility, which
Okay.
usually, if I'm being honest, is followed up by, well, I should be fair here, like, uh, I'm sorry, but and that problem is followed up by just general ignorance, by biblical illiteracy.
Right.
So yeah, I think, and this is a problem that, like, a lot of people have, including myself, not just non-Christians, but we have a
Yeah.
tendency to like create a straw man.
Hmm.
Like you may see the Westboro Baptist Church, or
Yeah.
just like really, really extreme
Yeah.
vocal minority, and you'll say
Right.
that's Christianity. Or you may have had a weird experience, and this is something I like to be sensitive to as well in my server, like spiritual abuse. It's very real.
Mm.
You may have been in a church where spiritual abuse,
Hold
took
on.
place. Go ahead.
Hold on, Liv. Could you explain what spiritual abuse is?
Okay, it's not something that I personally have experience with,
Hmm.
but my best understanding of it is that you have a person in a position of spiritual authority.
Hmm. Don't
Thank
worry
you.
about that. That's just me putting stuff. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no
Continue.
worries. That was good. But you have a person in a position of spiritual authority who abuses that spiritual authority, whether it be a televangelist who's
Right.
like, "Give me $1,000 to further God's kingdom,"
Right.
or whether you have someone who uses, and I don't mean to be like dark or triggering, but uses their position of authority to maybe abuse women, abuse
Mhm.
minors, and which comes up, like, which has come up in the news a lot.
Right.
And it's a shame. It's a serious shame. And it's like, on one hand, I get it why people would be like, maybe a little apprehensive of Christianity
Right.
after that, because it's like, if that was your experience, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna sit here and just say that's just anecdotal. That's valid.
Right.
But I think at the same time, very often we do, and I want to be careful here that I'm not being callous if someone has experienced legitimate abuse, because that is valid, that is real. But very often we have the problem of like hasty generalization when we come across, and as someone who has struggled with mental health issues, I get it. Like, cognitive distortions are a form of a logical fallacy, but they're so easy to fall into, especially when the emotions and the thought patterns are so strong.
Liv, you're dropping grenades right now. I don't even know if you realize you're doing it. Let's talk about some of that, some of the controversies that you've seen. I'm sure you're aware of the things that have happened at places like Bethel Church and obviously Stephen Furtick, characters like that, and then most recently, what's the name of the church? The big one, the hipster church.
The
Hillsong.
Hillsong?
Yeah.
Yes, I literally, I don't mean to interrupt you, Steve, but my
Okay.
friend was streaming a documentary in my server about that. So that's something like that came up really recently, and like it disturbed me immensely. But go ahead.
No, I want to hear your thoughts, because I think that sometimes that you brought up the Westboro Baptist Church, and another reason I wanted you to come up is because I had a sense that you would have a balanced approach to this entire thing, just observing the way you communicate in your Discord. What would you say to people? Well, what are your thoughts first on the Hillsong situation? Abuse of power, or was it just a sinner slipping up? What do you think about that whole thing?
It's tough because I'm an imperfect person, and I would never, like Christ said himself, take the log out of your own eye before you remove the speck from your brother's eye. He said, judge not lest you be judged, for the measure that you use will be measured against you.
I was just explaining this to someone else. Go ahead, Liz. Keep dropping
Yeah,
bars.
but it's tough because I know I'm a sinner, and that's the thing about being Christian. This doesn't make you a perfect person. It makes you aware of how much you need Christ. And that's the thing. And so I am very wary about saying I know the intentions of this man's heart. I know, like, the pastor of Hillsong, the former pastor of Hillsong, I should say, but at the same time, like, the Apostle Paul, I believe that was the Apostle Paul, who said we should be wise as serpents, innocent as doves. We should be discerning. We should beware of false teachers. Additionally, Christ himself said, you know a tree by its fruits, referring, I believe, in context to teachers.
Yeah.
So, and the Apostle Paul also says, I should add this, teachers will be held to a higher standard by God. And so I say this without saying anything about his salvific status,
Right.
but judging the fruit, I remember hearing, I guess I should say this, okay, I don't remember where I was going before I started like citing scripture, because scripture, Bible's an intellectual playground. It takes a lot out of me. But I remember hearing that Hillsong concerts would have VIP sections in the documentary, which troubled me so much, because it's like, that's the exact opposite of what the book of James says to do.
Yeah.
And it's like favoritism, being a what is the word? Respecter of persons.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's like the Bible, sometimes the Bible is silent on issues, but the one time the Bible isn't silent on an issue, you do that. And it's like, that troubled me so much when I heard about that. And it was, now, I guess back on the subject of you won't know a tree by its fruits.
Right.
I can't judge his heart. I can't judge his whether or not he is like a genuine Christian. Of course, I feel very like uncomfortable doing that for biblical, moral, and emotional reasons. But however, I don't think the way he was representing the gospel, the way he was preaching, I don't think it was helpful. I don't think it furthered like God's kingdom. I think it was very much an issue of like celebrity culture and like not being separate, being in the world but not of it, failing to do that.
I mean, you make valid points, and I definitely don't. I'm glad you were able to toe the line there, and I know that's an uncomfortable subject. The thing about it is, people constantly will say that Christians won't call out Christians when they've done something publicly, and I'm like, man, you must not be paying attention in the right places. If you go into Reformed Christian YouTube, you got guys like James White, Jeff Durbin, David Wood, some of these great theological minds who are constantly not being moral police of Christianity, but making sure they're protecting believers and non-believers from false teachings. So I'm glad you touched on that. Let's switch back to you for a second and your personal journey. So you're studying languages. Are you a language and theology nerd? Inquiring minds want to know.
Absolutely. And very, very, very much so. Very much so. I just finished okay, and this is not to toot my own horn. I literally like was surprised I even passed the class, but you know how you're required to take in some places you're required to take 4 semesters of a language. I just finished semester 6 of Latin, which is like that says less about my intellectual prowess and more just about the fact that I'm insane. And then I'm taking Greek, which is also optional. So tremendous voice crack there, but there you go.
No, don't worry about it. So let me ask you, what is it about the language? What
languages? Oh, I know this is not about languages, but I could go on and on. So languages to me, they're both. I love the. Okay. I want to make sure I'm like not wasting time by
You're not
going on
wasting
my
any
little
time.
language nerd rant, but I love that languages are both like objective and human. I love that they have a set of rules, and yet human beings being human beings, linguistic evolution happens. We make contractions, we break the rules, especially English, as you know, but it's so and it's humbling too. I saw a quote once that I unfortunately cannot attribute, but I think I have it saved in my Pinterest. But it said something to the effect of languages are the one thing that is worth knowing even poorly. And that is so true because it's like and it's so human. It's like you get a glimpse into a culture. You get a glimpse into what that culture valued by what terms they chose to use, what those terms connote and denote. It's so fascinating. And as someone who I just yanked out my earbud, I do that because I get too fidgety. But I can hear you though, don't worry. But no. As someone who studied a quote unquote dead language, Latin is my passion. I started it before middle school. Being like a homeschooled kid, that's like that's a pretty big stereotype that I would say is usually accurate. But I love Latin. Latin was ignited this love for languages. I have self-studied maybe a year's worth of Korean. I am so bad at it, but it's like an exercise in humility. It's one thing to be able to like read a grammar book. It's another entirely for me to try to talk to a Korean native and say, I can't understand a word you're saying because I'm actually not that auditorily intelligent. So it was definitely, it was so much fun, but you need to check your pride at the doors. I think you need to do with any issue.
I love the part you said about the culture, because language truly is the way that culture is transmitted in a lot of instances, and especially when you're talking about something like Aramaic and Latin, like these dead quote unquote dead languages. it is a blast to the past. I don't have the mind for it, unfortunately, or the patience, but I love that there are people who, like yourself, who do, because when I hear you speak of it, I'm just awash with, wow, it takes dedication to learn it, but what a gem to have learned it. Let's switch back to the hard questions. Are you having fun, by the way? I hope you're having a good
I
time.
am having a blast. Thank you so much, Steve.
No problem at all. Conversations that matter. If you just tuned in, we're with LivWhoWaits, theology nerd, language genius, and all around amazing debater and conversationalist. So, 2022, a lot of things going on in the world, a lot of contention, quote unquote, between the genders, between the sexes. And sometimes another thing you'll hear brought up in regards to Christianity is that it forces a woman into a subordinate role and diminishes a woman's value. As a woman of faith, what are your thoughts on that?
Wow. I don't know if you are referencing the abortion question or more like but if I may speak a little more generally,
Go for it.
I would say that if you did experience, so when I took my dad's freshman theology course. Yeah, I did take my dad's classes. It wasn't as weird as you would expect, but
That's
uh,
that's amazing.
yes, he's good at being like objective and like treating me in a fair, non-nepotistic way. But he taught us. He specifically like spent a whole class period teaching us the difference between patriarchalism, complementarianism, and egalitarianism, which is so valuable to this discussion because I see people see patriarchal Christians and say that is Christianity, when in reality, that is a vocal minority.
Okay.
Yeah. And I will admit, this is a question that has fascinated me for a while. I come from a background that is more complementarian, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
But I have seen like intelligent, in fact, the person, Stewart and Fee, who the theologians who wrote one of my dad's, one of the textbook that my dad uses in his class. They take an egalitarian perspective, which like they are like world class scholars, and that's not me trying to make an argument from authority, but that's like there are intelligent people who hold the egalitarian perspective as well. It's not just a emotional reaction, if that makes any sense. But coming from myself, I lean towards the complementarian perspective, although I need to do more research.
Could you just explain what that position is, the complementarian position, so people can know?
Of course. So
We're using a lot of Christianese right now, but I just want
to theologianese. But so egalitarianism is the idea that men and women are equal in both value and role. Complementarianism is the idea that men and women are equal in value but different role. Patriarchalism is the idea, this is me not trying to straw man it. I'm really trying to be fair, but it's the idea. Sorry, it's the idea that men are generally superior, men are more worthy, women cannot do anything without men's permission. Remember my dad using the example of a young unmarried woman deciding to go on a mission trip and someone saying, you shouldn't do that. You should have a man be the head. Like, you should wait till you're married so that you have a man be the head and tell you whether or not you're allowed to go on a mission trip, which is like whack, but but
yeah. I'm using constraint of tongue right now because I don't think they're. Well, no, this is your story. Go ahead. So explain your position. Explain your position for the audience, because I think sometimes women that are Christians, for non-believing women, they have a view of women who are Christians, and they just don't know that we're talking about some of the most intelligent lionesses that I've ever met. So explain your position.
Absolutely. And you haven't mentioned Mrs. Holdup before. Like, if I remember correctly, she's a housewife.
Yes.
But
Yes.
and the same thing with my mom. Both housewives, both scarily intelligent women.
Hmm.
Like, do not underestimate housewives. My dad likes to call my mom sneaky smart. She's a bookworm and a nerd. But as for the issue of complementarianism, I kind of think the idea that men and women are interchangeable in every single aspect
Okay.
is a very modern idea, and it's not actually backed by science, by psychology, by if you want to consider social studies like a like objective authority, social studies, or by the Bible. If you choose to submit to the authority of the Bible. And that is not me saying men are head over women or men should dominate women in every single aspect of life. I think, as someone who is researching the complementarian versus egalitarian perspectives, I think the idea that men are the head of the household and of the church applies simply to married women. Okay, I should say it applies to the household and the church. Like
Right.
single women, like the unmarried woman who wanted to go on a mission trip, she does not need to submit to just some rando Christian man.
Boom. That is one of the biggest misunderstood points that I've ever had, and it's always this weird straw man argument that people bring up. It was like, well, why do I need to submit to a man? No, it's not telling you need to submit to every man in the church. It's not even, that's not what that means at all. And by the way, thank you for articulating it in an amazing way. I noticed that your voice there, it goes back and forth. Like there's some times where you sound like you're going into shy mode, and then boom, when you're about to make your point, you snap right out of it. Are you a shy person? Really?
I'm very shy. I've come out of my shell a little bit with age. I think I'm discovering that I'm a bit of an ambivert, but I was a shy kid. I hated debate. My first yeah, maybe this is a story for another time, but I wanted to stress ate 2 bags of candy corn before a Lincoln Douglas debate. I didn't get sick, surprisingly. I had that teenage metabolism, but you know.
That's all right. My friend, my best friend, Fat Mantis, he's a youth pastor, and he stress eats candy before every Sunday.
Oh, I don't blame him. Like the youth, having to deal with the youth. Like I was a youth once. I was insufferable.
Well, I mean, that takes us to the next portion. I think another thing, if I should have had a bunch of unbelievers just prepare questions, but sometimes I can find that to be less than productive because we slip into subversive trolling and stuff like that. But here's another question that I want to throw out. Maybe you can clear it up. As a young Christian, when you see the state of the world today, what would be the message? Obviously, you would want to share the gospel, but what would be the message you would want to share around these issues that just seem to be so hot button, like gender, transgenderism, the LGBTQ conversation, the tension between the church and the rest of the world? If you were just you speaking on it yourself, what would you want to convey?
That is such a profound question. And it's something that I probably can't answer to like something that I probably can't answer fully. But me personally, I would encourage more self-reflection,
Okay.
if that makes any sense. I would encourage, and I read a book by Randy Newman, which talked about evangelism in a rabbinic way, which was asking people questions, putting them on the defensive, if that makes any sense. Too often, like, apologetics is very valuable. This is not me dissing apologetics, but very often we feel like we need to be on the defensive when in reality, many of these non-Christian positions require just as much faith as Christianity does. And it's like, yes, we should be prepared to give an answer as the book of Timothy says. But we also need to realize, hey, these people have their own biases, their own assumptions. We need to ask them, why do you believe this? What is your basis for believing this? And very often with questions, I guess to go back to your original question, speaking of questions, it's I would say I would encourage more people to learn to think clearly. Learn logic in school. Keep teaching logic in schools if it's not being taught, which
It's
I was
not.
homeschooled. Okay, I will take your word for it. I was homeschooled. But start teaching logic in schools. Teach people about ad hominem, straw manning, red herrings, the informal logical fallacies. Teach them not to be know-it-alls who are like, gotcha, that's a logical fallacy, but who are like, who know how to find them, and who know to guard themselves against it. There is a really interesting quote by Peter Kraft, by the way. I love Peter Kraft. But he said, and this is gonna sound really like sacrilegious almost, but that's kind of like,
Let
it's
it
so
fly.
challenging.
Go for it.
But it's like, it's better to seek truth. Sorry, not seek truth. It's better to reject God than to reject truth. Because a God who is being worshipped while rejecting truth is not the true God.
Liv, I don't know if we're related in some way, shape, or form. No, here's the crazy thing. IGN just said, think critically. I really enjoy the fact that critical thinking is something that's becoming widely commercialized, and I mean that in the most respectful way. I love that you can go on YouTube and learn the basics for logics. I love you were describing questions, and that's, the Socratic method of questioning. I always talk about this with people. I'm like, learn what that is and learn how to ask appropriate questions so you can discern truth. And you were talking about polemics versus apologetics. Apologetics, obviously the defense. Polemics being going on the offensive in regards to defending the faith. I want to ask you one final question.
Mm-hmm.
What is? Oh no, let me not do that. Who is your favorite theologian?
I mean, I could say my dad, but I'm a little biased.
Okay, outside of your dad, shout out to Papa.
Oh my gosh. See, like I said, I'm very much a baby theological student. So there are many like really great classic modern ancient medieval, I don't know, just throughout history, so many great theologians that I've not read yet.
All right.
And I'm currently reading C.S. Lewis. He was not a theologian. He was an Oxford professor of, yeah, but he's very accessible and fun to read. I've been recommended J.I. Packer, who is, I read a little bit of his book. Which book was it? Oh my gosh, Knowing God. That was recommended to me by my U.S. history professor, who is one of my favorite people ever as well. But J.I. Packer, Wayne Grudem, who else? I like Peter Kraft as a philosopher a lot. I enjoy his writing style. I love
Augustine. Have you ever read Augustine?
Yes.
Okay.
Augustine is amazing. Or Augustine, however you choose to stress the syllables or pronounce it. He is amazing. Confessions is a classic for a reason. I'm not as well read as you would probably think, partly because I am a slow reader, and partly because, let's be real, I was not always an inquisitive child. I mean, in some ways I still am not, which is something like, it's less an issue of being like smart and not smart, more of an issue of like intellectual laziness versus intellectual doing the legwork intellectually. And it's like, I struggle sometimes. I'm a little laid back. I'm like, yes, I could read this really good book, but reading feels like work. Oh, I should mention what's his name? Dane Orfland. But he wrote a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book that my recent graduate friend who went to the same school as I did recommended to me called Gentle and Lowly, which is a beautiful book. I highly recommend it to anybody who struggles to feel like God doesn't love them, God doesn't show mercy, God is more wrathful than merciful, or that God is disappointed with you. Like he may love you, but he's like disappointed. So it's like it's a beautiful, beautiful book. Hard intellectual theology. Okay. I should also mention William Lane Craig. Yes, yes. But I feel like you have more to ask and more to add.
No, that was no, Liv. The smile on my face right now. If anyone that knows me from this group that I travel with, they know that I am like, I'm having a good time. I'm, because you're like doing something that really warms my heart, and I don't mean this in any pompous sort of way, man. It's rare to meet a young person such as yourself who has acquired this information, isn't haughty about it, and wants to share it with people. And there's a loving tone and temperament about you. So I guess my next question is to get you in trouble with your dad. Would you be allowed, or have you guys gotten to a point where you're examining stuff with like Thomas Aquinas or anything like that?
Oh my! What do you mean by that? Like in his classes?
Yeah, in his classes, has that subject come up yet? Or like church? Have
So
you been through church history? Are you going through church history? Any of that stuff right now?
I am a less educated. I'm less educated on that. The thing is, I took his class
Okay.
when it was more doctrinally focused, and
Okay.
then I withdrew from it because health issues, and then I retook it, and then he revamped the curriculum and made it more biblically focused, if that
Oh,
makes
I'm
sense, which I
sorry.
thought was a good thing. And so there we covered like really early church history, but back when it was more doctrinally focused.
Mhm.
Oh, D Love. So it's on my. If you don't mind me, like,
You can drop any link you
doing a
want.
little crab crawl over to my bookshelf, but it is called Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortlund. I pronounced his name wrong the first time. So it is spelled Ortlund. Ortlund. Gentle and Lowly. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. I would recommend anybody, Christian, non-Christian, read it.
So let me ask you this question. That should have been the last question, but you just spurred something on me. You were talking about health issues and dealing with mental health issues in the past, and in light of speaking about this book, I think that's another thing that's a misnomer. The question of evil. I'm not asking you to solve that theological grenade right there, but you personally in your life having to deal with heartache and pain or health issues. How have you been able to maintain your faith?
That is a wonderful question. That is such a Liv, can you vouch for me? What I'm trying to figure out what I should be vouching for. Think critically, because I see you said think critically. I absolutely agree 100%. I can totally vouch for you on that. And IGN Akemi, I can vouch for you in any other respect because I know you. I know you are an excellent, wonderful, kind, sweet, and funny person. So yeah, but what would I say in regards to that? So I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder when I was 16. My story about stress eating the 2 bags of candy corn was my first real depressive episode. That was when I discovered I had depression, and I won that debate, by the way, not because I'm smart, but because I was overhyping it in my mind, and I was like, "Bruh, I can't do this." But but the point being was I always described like my depression is much better now, and my depression is so much better now. Thank God for that. And it's because I sought treatment. It is because I sought medication and therapy, which is not a non-Christian thing to do. It is not an example of lacking faith. I really, as someone who has gone through that, and as someone who knows like adults in my life, like my US history professor, even my family members who have gone through that, I really, really strongly object to the idea that it's an example of you lacking faith to go to doctors or psychiatrists or licensed therapists.
Right.
So to elaborate on what you said, give me one sec.
Take your time. I'm just gonna Monday
VA.
Yeah,
Monday VA is a friend of mine. But I love what he has to say.
Look at it. I'm sorry.
No, but yeah, absolutely. But I always described my depression, like speaking from personal experience and like the thought processes that went into it. I believed all the thoughts I had at first. It was like thoughts of nihilism, thoughts of life is not worth living. That I believed all of that. And it was through the process of learning to think critically, learning to examine biases and cognitive distortions. And strangely enough, during my first hospital, or my only hospital visit, I should say, thankfully I'm like really healthy right now. But during my hospital visit, there was a nurse who recommended Viktor Frankl to me. Viktor Frankl was Man's Search for Meaning, which was so helpful with like my nihilistic tendencies when I was depressed, and it showed me that it wasn't reasonable.
Right.
And that's the point I'm making. And like my depression was like a worldview switch, because you know how every worldview is founded on faith.
Yeah.
So nihilism was founded on faith, and it's like every time I would slip into a depressive episode, it would be like I would be experiencing like a shift into nihilism, but I had an anchor. I had my faith. And I shouldn't say my faith, like it was something I came up with and something that was just like me, myself. I had Christ. I had a high priest who is empathetic in our weakness. I had a source of objective truth that I could go back to, and I could be like, this is my anchor, no matter how strongly I keep going in these depressive circles, no matter how strongly I feel like life is not worth living, no matter how strongly I may feel that way, I know life is worth living. I know my God has a purpose for me. And I'm not saying I prayed the depression away or that the depression went away immediately, or even when people did like targeted prayer for me, that did not take the depression away. What I'm saying is, if it weren't for my strong belief in the idea of objective meaning and value that comes from God, I would probably not be here right now.
Powerful stuff, powerful. And I'm truly grateful that prayers were answered on your behalf. And I really do hope that when this is, the replay is up, that someone can draw strength from that and know that they can draw strength from your experience and draw strength from God. Liv, you, as Da Vinci said, you are an intellectual powerhouse. I've enjoyed this conversation. There were so many other things. Does Steve do Christian only stuff? What is Christian only stuff? Do you mean like, do I wear a bow tie and prance around in the street? No, I do things. I take my family out. We live in the world. I just try to do my best to make sure I discern what things are best for my family based on my belief structure, which I am not great at myself. But as I continue on my faith journey, the one thing I always remember is that I don't want to project anything that I can't keep up myself. So, Liv, thank you for coming on. I wanted to ask you. So there were so many other places I wanted to go tonight, but I was like, I don't want to get too theologically deep. I was going to go into hermeneutics, biblical translations, but I just felt like it was better to have people get to know you. Also, thank you for the work that you've been doing over in my ghost town of a Discord. I appreciate that for you. I need to tend to that thing much more than I do. Any last minute shout outs or anything you want to promote or just anything you want to get off your chest?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steve. I enjoyed this so much. And I would say, so to answer Akemi's question, I just feel like that I should vouch for you, Steve. Steve does not do exclusively Christian stuff.
No, I do.
I got to know Steve through a discussion he had, or a discussion he hosted between 4 women about the issue of abortion. And if I may, like, drop a bombshell real quick, my reasons for being pro-life are not religious.
Okay.
Exclusively. I mean, obviously, the fact that I think human beings are made in the image of God, that matters. But I do think not murdering people is not an exclusively religious position. Like, anybody can agree on the sacredness of human life, and my reasons are scientific, philosophical, ethical, and whatnot. But in terms of like things I might want to promote, I don't have a YouTube or Twitch, at least not an active one, but I have a little server, a little itty bitty slowly growing server. It is a private server called Vacation Bible School, and despite the title, it is not exclusively religious.
It isn't.
There is a slight majority of non-religious people. Slight majority, I would, slight majority of non-religious people. But I have a role menu where you can choose your religion if you feel comfortable sharing that. But the point of the server is not for me to promote Christian propaganda or push my beliefs on you. It's just a place to chill, to VC, because I get way too chatty and I need people to talk to, and to wild out, to have fun, to post memes. And every now and again, when people are up for it, when people have the spoons and the mental energy and are in the mindset for it, to have discussions about life, have discussions about life, philosophy. I'm even trying to get a book club going if I can. But yeah, it's a little bookish, philosophical, chill, wholesome 16 plus. Yeah, 16 plus server where we keep things safe for work. So that is really my only outlet, like social media wise. But Vacation Bible School. There is a link to it in Steve's server if you are a part of that.
And you can check the bio and the bio in this video has the link as well. Oh wait, let me make sure it should have the link. If not, come to my server and I'll put it on the recap. Liv, let me ask you one last question. So when you came in for the conversation, was there a part of you that was like ready to jump up on the call yourself? And then I would be terribly interested. Well, would you be interested in coming back? Because I would love to hear your critique of the entire conversation. And that would be something that I would love to do with you, like as like a panel conversation thing. And I know you wanted to do a few other things in collaboration, but would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely. I am very, very passionate about the whole discussion surrounding abortion. Okay. I am super, super passionate, and I would love to be on a panel on just like whatever you would have for me.
Yes, absolutely, folks. I gotta tell you, man, Liv, I'm trying not to fanboy out, but if I had a daughter, I'd be like, go hang out with Liv. please. This has been a great conversation. I hope you had fun. I hope you felt comfortable. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. Thank you for sharing your faith. And most importantly, thank you for remaining objective and articulate throughout the entire thing. It's your boy Steve, real name, no gimmick. Shout out to everyone that came out. If the link for Liv's Discord is not in the description of this video, you can come over to my Discord and get it, but I will put it up in the replay. I ask that you be mindful and respectful of the community that she is growing over there. And if you don't want no trouble, don't come in there acting stupid, because as you can hear, she will sun you up. I'll see you guys for Dumbing Out at 10 p.m. with DJ Sensi Star. And again, make sure you reach out to Liv, and yeah, let's get her back on the show. Let's encourage her and let's thank her for everything. Liv, you're amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you, Steve. You are too.
All right, guys. I'll see you on a little bit. Peace out.